Here to tell you a little bit of what God has done in my life and what He's brought me through and what He's still bringing me through today. But I just want to thank God that I'm standing here and that I get to share with you. And yeah, I'm just going to go straight into it. So my name is Natasha and I'm from the south of Ireland. I'm one of 6 kids. So we always had a busy household growing up. My mother and father were married, but separated when I was about 4 years of age. Now my two, so I say there's 6 of us. My 2 younger sisters are from the last relationship, and then my older sister would have been from a previous relationship before my mother was married to my father. So I have 2 full brothers, and they say, well, I don't really go with half this and half that. So as I say, my mother remarried, well, got into another relationship really fast after my father and her had split up, or my father and my mother had split up. So the man that she got into another relationship, she was with him for 14 years, so he did basically raise us, but he was a very violent man, not only to my mother but also to us kids. With having the older sister and brother, they seemed to escape and get away, but still suffered their fair share of abuse, and the younger 2 would be quite young to remember some of it, but yet still some of it traumatic that they do remember. I was never really one for school, I would try and get off as much as you can, pulling sickies and all that kind of stuff. And it had an effect. The abuse that we were going through in the family home had an effect on my school life, and my school life had an effect on home life. So I used to try and disappear out of the house as much as I could. And for me, at the age of 8, you can't really go very far, can you? So it was into my next door neighbour's house, where I then suffered abuse from my next door neighbour. That continued for several years until one day we were told, that we were moving towns, we were moving homes, and I thought, oh, this was brilliant, everything is going to change. But unfortunately it didn't, the sexual things may have stopped, but the abuse within the family home from my stepfather got a lot worse. By this stage, I rarely was in school. So it would always seem like the youngest one of us, myself and my mother, would always be with my stepfather. And just, it came one point, I think I was not far off 13 years of age, and he held us hostage within the house. We lived in a 3-story house, new town, didn't really know anyone. We only lived in a row of 8 houses. Now, luckily that the walls were paper thin that you could hear through. So he held us hostage. He really, really hurt my mother, tried to slit her throat in front of I, who was 13, nearly 13, and a 3-year-old, which was really traumatic. Out of all the abuse that we seen and suffered, it was quite the worst at that age. So, as I said, a neighbour heard a screech for help, and the guards came. He got arrested, and thankfully my mother did get him locked. He did get put to prison this time, but he didn't serve very long. I think he done a period of 3-4 months. And my mother took him back, when he came out after that, which I found very devastating for what went through between him getting out and stuff out of prison. I had been to doctors. I think that's when my drug addiction really kind of kicked in. I was brought to the doctor with PTSD. And they then prescribed me antidepressants and I don't know what you call them, like Valium, relaxers, mood stabilizers. And I even remember, you know, taking them for the first time, and just, you know, that feeling, it was great, you know. It was escapism, and that's where I mightn't have been taking them every day, but, you know, I went off the railings completely. So my stepfather got out of prison, and I then left the family home to live with my grandmother, which wasn't an easy woman to live with either, but it was easy for me, because I would tell my grandmother I was with my mother. I would tell my mother I was with my grandmother, but yet I was out doing what I wanted to do. I was hanging out with a much older group of people, and just living life the way I wanted to. Now, unfortunately, my drug addiction and my alcohol intake very rapidly just spiraled out of control. I went from every couple of days to every day. By the age of 16, I was in trouble many times with the guards myself, being in prison cells, or just trouble. And I would go home at the weekends and stuff. I would still be with my family, as we were such a close family, but obviously just doing what I wanted to do. By the age of 15, 16, I then too got into a relationship myself, which wasn't much better than the relationship my mother was having. It was, you know, they say the honeymoon period for all of 2 minutes. But, you know, I was young, I was foolish, and I wanted a father figure in my life. You know, he was a couple of years older, but just the violence and stuff I suffered within that, the control, just everything out of a toxic relationship. And it took me very hard to get away from him. You know, I say to people that I was going to get married once. I have to laugh at myself sometimes when I say this. I only said yes to the proposal because I was so off my face, you know. I really, and it was because we kind of had an audience. I didn't to be honest, I didn't want to get a beating afterwards if I said no, you know. I was living with him, and also, you know, the more our relationship went on, the more I seen how controlling and stuff it was. But he used, you know, there was the physical violence and the sexual violence and all of that, but there was, anytime I would go to break up with him, he would severely hurt himself, you know. He missed nearly a centimetre off his jugular one time when I said, look, it's over, you know, I just can't put up with this anymore. And he cut his own throat in front of me. Before he cut his throat, I was tied to a chair, locked in a room, and because I wouldn't look at the wound this time, you know, I had blood swiped on my face. I was then held in that room for 3 days afterwards, you know, not knowing that he was off in hospital for himself, you know. I had a dog food bowl of water to do me for those 3 days. I was with him for several years, but it was actually how I broke free from that was because after he put me into intensive care for the second time, when I told him that I really couldn't go through with marriage. So there was a wedding planned, there was dresses bought, all that goes along with it, but yet I really had no input into that because I didn't want it. And so when I told him 2 weeks before I turned 17, I couldn't go through with the marriage. I said I would continue with the relationship, but I can't go through with marriage. And he put me into intensive care. So knowing the things that my eldest sister and my mother knew, you know, when the guards were called and stuff like that, neighbours heard arguments and stuff. So it was actually the guards that found me and rang an ambulance, took me to the hospital. They held him in the station for a little while. But once family knew, or once all the information was put in front of the guards actually put him to prison. And this time round that he was in prison, He, I was barred from everything. So if they knew me going in to see him, I wouldn't be able to get in. They had me completely barred. Phone calls, even though you can still get someone's number on your phone card, it was. I do have to say that they really looked into that department, and no contact at all with me, it was a blessing in disguise, because I would have wound up dead if I was with him any longer. But that didn't stop me getting into more foolish relationships. By this stage, I was heroin, crack, coke, every drug underneath the sun, and alcohol I was taking on a daily basis to numb all that I was going through. So from stupid to more stupid, I was in prison several times myself because of my trying to fend for your drug habit. And people say, you in prison? But I was in there a total of 5 times, which is really daunting to think back that I survived in prison. I wasn't the first small little person to be inside there, but you have to put on such a front. You have to be bigger than what you are. And even though I'm only 5'3", I had to think that I was 10 foot and go on about my day. So come to the age of 21 I was, and it was my second last sentence that I was in prison for. I got a phone call I didn't get a phone call, I got called out of the yard one day, and I was called up into the office with the governor and all that, and they said, we got a phone call, you're to ring your aunt. And I was thinking, that's a bit of a weird message to be getting inside here, So I went then to use my 6-minute phone call, but I didn't get through to my aunt. So I went back and I said, did they leave a message? What's this all about? Wasting my time here. And there was 3 officers sitting inside at that small, tiny little office. And they says to me, they goes, we think you should sit down for this. And I goes, right, okay. So I sat away down. And they goes, well, we had a message to say that your mother and her partner have been killed in a road accident. And I goes, seriously? I goes, my mother is the worst person in the world to get into the car with some, she was such a nervous passenger. It was the least way I would have thought that she went. And I went to go about my business again. Now, I do have to say, 2 days before I got this message, there was a big parcel came into the prison. So, I wasn't in reality. And they had to call me back to the office, and they goes, no, Natasha, this news is real. So I then kind of sat there in awe for a little bit. And I went and I made my phone call, and I just said to my aunt, I goes, this isn't true, is it? And she said, yeah, and I just dropped the phone. I remember going back to my cell, as clear as it was yesterday. Those doors just slamming shut, and it was the coldness, the smell of damp, just even the stupid little things you don't want to remember. And just sitting there for a little while, and there was actually a girl from the same town that I would have palled about with. And one of the officers left her into my cell for a couple of hours. And they were like, Natasha, what are you doing? Are you getting out, or what's going on? I was so in a daze, saying to myself over and over again, this isn't true, this isn't true. And, eventually I had a phone call come in into the office phone for me, and they said, look, we'll be here in such a length of time, and we'll be coming to get you out and stuff, which I wasn't. They actually had to postpone the funeral and stuff for a couple of days so I could get out. Now, mind you, I think I only had about 3 or 4 weeks left of a 9-month sentence, but it was weekend and, all the protocol and everything that they have to go through. But I got out, funeral, all that kind of stuff, it was devastating, but I was not in reality in one way. My heroin addiction spiraled, and crack spiraled completely out of control. I injected so much into one of my veins just in my hand, I nearly lost it. I had 2 operations on that hand, and it didn't frighten me, because while I was in hospital, I was getting people to come up with me. I couldn't go sick. So, you know, how bad my addiction and everything went. I forgot to say, my eldest sister, who's a couple of years older than me, also had a heroin addiction, but started heroin after I did. It was actually a boy that she got with too. He was on it many years before her, and just, you know how it goes. But 5 months after I lost my mother, I lost my sister. At this time, I attempted to try and get clean. So for me, trying to get clean was, I left my family home, or left the house. By this stage now, I said there was 6 of us. You know, we after my mother's death, we had all kind of separated. My 2 younger sisters got put into foster care, and my eldest brother, he was just, you know, he wanted someone to blame, and myself and my sister were to blame because the way my mother met her partner, and it was her partner that was driving and so on. And then my younger brother was always kind of with a family member and stuff. So we were all really separated, but me and my sister, we were like Siamese twins, you know. There was no separating us. If she had a down day, I'd pick her up. If I had a down day, she'd be there to pick me up. So I was gone to a relative's house, and I said, look, right, I'm coming off heroin, just give me methadone. You know, I was buying methadone off someone, and I was taking tablets, and that was me trying to get clean, you know. I was there for only about 2 weeks, and I got a phone call off my sister, who was then 11 or 12, to say, oh, Chloe's acting all funny again, you know, in the bathroom, but it's not the usual kind of funny. I think there's something wrong, you know. She has the bathroom door locked, but I can't get in, I can't do anything. So I said, Chanel, I goes, put your dad on the phone, so which is my stepdad. And now I do have to say, he only came back to live in the family home after my mother died, just for the sake of us keeping the 2 younger sisters and stuff like that. So yeah, on the phone, and I said, Tony, I goes, do you want to ring an ambulance now fast? And I goes, like, there's no point me even talking to you on the phone. I goes, you're going to have to hang up and ring an ambulance. He goes, right, I'll sort it. So I came off the phone, and I heard no more. Like, that was 9 o'clock at night, and I heard no more till 9 o'clock the next morning. And it was my stepdad again saying, you know, she's dead. And I goes, I told you to ring an ambulance last night. And he said, we couldn't ring an ambulance because social workers would be involved. And I goes, in what way, you know? I goes, did she come round? I goes, what actually happened to say? So there was a lot that went on that night, and I fully don't know the whole truth, you know, but I do know that my 2 sisters, who like 11 or 12 they were, had found their eldest sister dead on the bathroom floor. And I think actually one of them had been up the majority of the night with her on the bathroom floor. And just, that was, you know, that was another devastating shock, you know. I then proceeded to get the train back down home, you know, before I even went to see her body in the morgue. You know, I got a friend to meet me at the train station, and I left the people closest to me waiting in the car while I went to inject more heroin just after my sister died. You would think that you'd have more sense, wouldn't you? But that's not the way, you know. So got over her funeral, and that really did break me, you know. I think I just went into pilot mode, into survivor mode. The next couple of months, you know, was so depressing, but I was doing anything to get drugs, you know, absolutely anything. Now, I forgot to mention, you know, through the age of 15 till the age of 21, I had lost 3 kids, miscarriages, and you know, life just knocks you down. But one night I remember, it was a couple of months after my sister died, and I said, God, I goes, why have you left me to this mess? Like, as if like I was better to go than any of the rest of them, you know, but that's not the way it goes. And I'm seeing now why God has kept me on this earth, and how many times I overdosed from drugs, and how many times I had even been in mental hospitals trying to take my own life and everything. And, you know, I'm still standing here to tell my story. But that night anyway, I didn't sleep a wink. You know, I think I was actually getting sick a little bit from not having enough drugs. And after my saying that to God and stuff, I knew of a family that were Christians. So anytime, you know, that I would go into his chemist and get my prescription and stuff like that, he would always tell me that God loved me. And of course my response was, you know, someone kind of has to. And he did hand me a Bible one day, but I didn't even really look at it. But anyway, I rang him one day and I said, Norman, I goes, what time does church start? And he goes, oh, you're coming to church, that's fantastic, we'll bring you for lunch afterwards. I'm like, oh right, am I actually doing the right thing here, you know? So I proceeded, I went on to church the following morning, and God just started speaking to me, you know. That man asked me, they were doing a bit of worship, and it was different than what church they normally do. And he said, Natasha, he goes, do you have any song you want to put on? I goes, Norman, I goes, my songs wouldn't be great up front here. And then I just felt, you know, a song is called Follow Me, Uncle, whatever his name is. And I just felt, no, Norman, I'll put this one on. Now, like, it was as if we had a rave or something, you know. But the words along that really gripped me, and many times I would have heard that out clubbing and all sorts, but the words really that gripped me that day was, come follow me. And I really, you know, that's what God was saying to me in that moment, was come follow me. You know, church was over, I got prayed for and all that, and there was something within that step that I made in even going to church, because I felt great days after, you know, after one little prayer. I'm like, now mind you, it didn't last very much because of the sin that I was living in. But I remember going into that man the following morning, you know, I was like, Norman, that's great, you know, I feel fantastic, the best I've felt in a long time. And he was like, oh, well, you can come again next week. And but I didn't, you know, I went to church one time, but I knew God was doing a work in my heart, you know. He was leading people in my way. So the next coming of weeks and months and stuff, there was just people coming about me that were Christians, you know, that loved God and wanted to share the word of God. And there was something about these people, you know, there was such a shine upon their faces. I'm like, you know, you want that. And the more drugs that you take, you know, you're just... but anyway, God brought these two people into my life. Linda and Davey is their name. So it'll be Liam's parents-in-law. And it was actually a friend of mine said to me, oh, I think you should meet this couple. And she was saying it to me for a while, but, you know, she suffered with her mental health and stuff. So you kind of always didn't pick up on everything do anything that she asked you to do, you know. But I said one day, I goes, oh, Rita, I goes, I've not much to do, so we might as well share. What am I going to lose? And I had an instant connection with the woman, Linda, you know, and we sat and spoke for all of 10, 15 minutes, if that. But we swapped numbers and stuff. So any time that Linda and Davey would have been down from the north of Ireland to the south, they would always ring me and say, oh, come on, we'll go for a coffee or something. And, you know, I did meet them, I think, all bar one time. And I would have been out of my face and all, but they knew all along, you know, they knew they could see through addiction. They actually have their own rehab centre. Christian Discipling Center in the north of Ireland. And I didn't realise at the time of meeting these people for just a coffee and a chat that they were actually ministering to me. And now I forgot to say, in the middle of all this, I was waiting a court date. Well, I was up and down, in and out of court for a particular charge. So I could have been looking at 7 to 10 years for carrying drugs into a prison that I got caught with. Now, mind you, I wasn't in prison, put into prison at the time. It was a boy that I was going to see. And being foolish again for men, you know, you'd get your drugs and you'll get whatever money and you'd sell and you'd have enough that you won't be going sick. So I brought these drugs in. So of course, when this couple mentioned to me about a treatment centre, a rehab centre, I'm thinking, right, you've tried rehab a couple of times before, you know, it hasn't worked. Just stick it out for a couple of months, you know, it'll look good for your court and whatnot. So in January 2016, I went to their treatment centre. At this stage now, I should have been off all the drugs and stuff like that, but I think it was like 2 days before I went there, I came off a lot of heavy medication from doctors, and I had cut down on heroin, but I was probably still taking a bit of methadone and all that. So I went there for a period of 10 months. You know, I was hearing the word of God. I was seeing what it looked like to live a clean life. But I wasn't fully open to actually changing. You know, I didn't deal with any of the crap that had went on all my life. You know, I just went on as everyday life, just without drugs. Now, within that time, I had a couple of sips. I went off to the pub or something, you know, but there was something keeping me there, you know, and it was God, obviously. But after 10 months, I just left. I said, I can't do this no more, you know, it's not for me. Even if I am going to get a big prison time, you know, I don't really care, just once I can get my drugs, really. You know, I left that night. It's a 7-hour journey from where that rehab was to my hometown. I went the 6 hours. I had arranged to meet up with a friend, and I had a hit of heroin. I injected into my leg, and 20 minutes later, walking down the road, my 2 legs went from underneath me. I lost all the feeling in my right leg, and I was completely out of it because I took the same amount of hit that I would have done before I was. So I was overdosing. Now the person that I was with, just kind of, you know, as small as and all as I am, threw me over his shoulder, and he was actually homeless at the time. So we were in a tent for a night. Well, I was in the tent for a night, and not knowing that I was actually in the tent, and not knowing the fully and all that he had done to me within that night. Just in and out of, you know, goose and all that kind of stuff. So the next day I woke up, I was, you know, still a bit not feeling 100%. I couldn't really move my leg very much, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, like, what am I after doing to my leg? But I proceeded to leave that person and walk on and go and face my family and say, you know, I'm after leaving rehab for the 3rd time. It's just not for me. So I left, and I was, within 6 months, I was on the streets myself. I was, my elder brother would leave me stay on his sofa every now and again, but he would always catch me injecting heroin or something. You know, it was the way, you know, I just didn't really think very anything of them and their kindness and them trying to get me right because of my addiction. But after about 6 months, you know, within those 6 months, I wasn't enjoying taking drugs the way I had in all the years I did. You know, I do know that God was working on me. He was doing something within me. And I just remember getting down on my knees one day, and I was really sick, and I was in my brother's kitchen, and I just said, God, I know a little bit of you, but I really, really need to know you, and I need you to get me out of this. I then, after a couple of hours, I was so sick and stuff, but I rang that woman from the treatment centre again, and she knew by my voice and stuff I was really not in the right place, and I just said, would there be any possible way that I can come back, and I am gonna put my 100% into it this time. But obviously I had to go dry a little bit, so I went to stay with a mutual friend of ours, and I stayed there for about 2 weeks, and then I went back to the rehab. Now, I was only there about a week, and I had to come back to my hometown for a court appearance, and so I went back home. I went down the night before, obviously, because of the length of time it takes, and that night I got off the bus or train or whatever it was, and I met up with my cousin and an ex-boyfriend of mine, and went on taking tablets and heroin again and a bottle of wine or whatever it was. And I felt so guilty. I felt like if someone could have ripped out my heart and saying, I said to God that I was going to do my all, I was going to get myself right. My friend ringing them and telling them, I'm after taking what I'm after taking. You have 2 young kids. Is it okay to come back? She drove all the way up, came and got me. Came to the court the next day with me and everything. I walked away from that court case, which was minor than the other one I had. And straight away it was, right, I'll meet back up with the boys and I won't bother going back to rehab. So I was getting a lift to meet up with them. And then again, God was, just all that was going over my head is, Natasha, you can't do this. You really can't do this. So I told her, I actually can't go back to the rehab today. There's something, I just have to wait until tomorrow. So I went back to stay with them for the night. But within that, we stopped off at a coffee shop and we sat and we had a cup of coffee. Now we were only in there about not even 5-10 minutes, and her brother-in-law came in, and he had been saved about a year or so beforehand, and he used to do these prayer meetings and stuff out the road, and he asked me to come and join. So I says, yeah, I will, but that night I didn't realise, why God was speaking to me and why I was stopping, from the moment I entered that room. And it was just in a hotel room, it wasn't anything fancy, a church or anything like that. It was just a room where people gathered every week and prayed and worshipped and just sought the Lord. And I just over that threshold into that room, I just felt the presence of God. It was, it nearly knocked me back out the door. That's how strong it was. So we went through and, they were going about their night and stuff. And it was like about a couple of minutes before the night was going to end. We were in there from about 9 o'clock and this was coming up to 11 or something, or could have been earlier, whatever. And a man suggested that we'll do this prayer tunnel or whatnot. So I never really witnessed anything like this and stuff. So they all gathered around, and there was a couple of people just kind of, I think they do it at weddings and stuff. But you just kind of go in under their hands and they pray for you and you just go in around. But the first time I felt, getting a bit wobbly and all this. I'm like, this isn't right here. I haven't had anything today. But then I think I went in around it twice, and I went to sit back down in the chair and left everyone go on about their business. And a man said to me, he goes, no, you're not done yet. Come on away back up. And I goes, no. I goes, I'm fine. And then I just felt, just had that urge. I went back in, and the chair time, I got to the first person, and whoa, I was whacked with the Holy Spirit, but we're just praying, and I was just kind of, I was just underneath the Spirit. But going to the second person, I was like, I know the Holy Spirit anyway, but I felt my knees, and just I had people still over me praying for me and stuff like that, and I just sobbed my heart out. I mean, I cried louder than, I don't know, like, I can't even explain how loud I even heard myself cry. And I'm saying to myself in my head, Natasha, you never cry. Get up off the floor, you're making a holy show out of yourself. And I couldn't move, you know. It was God was doing his work in me. I was down on that floor for a couple of hours, and when I sat back up and stuff, you know, there was people just around me, and not in a frightening way or anything. And I felt like, you know, I felt so clean, I felt so fresh, and I felt happy. I felt a bit of joy. You know, it was so many emotions into such a little period of time in one day. It was, but so anyway, that happened that night, and you know, I would really say that was the 5th of May 2017, and I would say that's the day God saved me. I went back to the rehab, and I started talking my issues out. I started reading the Bible. I started experiencing God in the way, you know, that I never thought I would have. And my life, you know, kind of from then, you know, you have your ups and downs. I'm not going to say that it's easy for any of you, because it's not. You know, I've relapsed quite some times, but it's the grace and mercy God gives to you in getting back up and not staying down. You know, God has blessed me in so many different ways. I'm here for one in South Africa for my second time. You know, I've travelled quite a bit, whereas before I owned a passport, but it was only for the sake of ID when you needed ID. I've travelled many places. You know, I see the goodness in people, whereas before I thought everyone was against you. I just, you know, there's love in my heart. I have forgiven for things that I never thought I would forgive, and there's some release and forgiveness. You know, I got accepted for a Bible college for someone that didn't know how to read and write up until 2 or 3 years ago, and it still wouldn't be great. But unfortunately, my visa didn't work out for Bible college and stuff, so I get to stay here a bit longer. I'm meant to be going home on Tuesday, but I'm actually staying till December. You know, I see my family, even though they're still stuck where they are, I see God is doing an amazing work in their life. The youngest one of us is going to be 18 tomorrow, which, like, I still remember when she came home from the hospital, and even her story is amazing. But, you know, as Liam said, we all have a story to tell, and we are all precious and worthy. And, you know, I think I'm going to stop there. But I do have a scripture to read out for you. I hope you understood my accent, because when I'm talking to family or people from down home, I'm like really fast and stuff. I even note myself these days, when I'm on the phone, it's just back to my original accent. But I don't know what's going on here. I actually can't get it up, but it's in Ephesians 4:17 downwards, and it's just about the verse that really spoke out to me, was take off your old self and put on your new self. Guys, just, you know, ye are working through so much, and it's hard working through what you're working through it, and God will give you the strength. But if you think that you can leave being sober for so long and go back to where you are, or wherever you may end up, you know, to go back to old surroundings, even people you hung out with, or, you know, even watching the same things that you used to watch, you know, in some cases, you know, it doesn't work. You're not going to feel that it's the same, and you're either going to slip back into addiction, or you're going to be victorious with God, you know. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but, you know, you will make it, and God is your strength.